Secretary General, we move on.
Motion pursuant to Section 51 of the Constitution of the Republic of Fiji and Standing Order 130.
I now call upon the Attorney General and Minister for Economy, Civil Service and Communications, the Honorable Ayaz Syed Qayyum, to move his motion. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, for the purpose of Section 51 of the Constitution of the Republic of Fiji, and pursuant to Standing Order 130, Mr. Speaker, sir, I move that Parliament approves that Fiji accedes to the 2011 Asia-Pacific Convention on the Recognition of Higher Education Qualifications. Thank you, sir.
Is there a seconder?
Honourable Speaker, sir, I beg to second the motion.
I now call on the Attorney General and Minister for Economy, Civil Service and Communications, the Honorable Ayaz Syed Qayyum, to speak on his motion. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'd like to, of course, thank the committee for the tabling of the report in relation to the convention. We know that 100% of the submissions that were received by the committee urged the state to accede to the convention. Just by way of background, Mr. Speaker, sir, a recent study by the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, or commonly known as UNESCO, Institute for Statistics, found that the Asia-Pacific region influenced global trends in student migration. The Asia-Pacific region makes up 28% of the global total of international students. There was a 164% increase in tertiary students from 1999 to 2014, seeking to study in the Asia and Pacific region. This trend led to the Asia-Pacific region becoming one of the top destinations for international students. To support the increased cross-border mobility of students and to ensure access to quality education, UNESCO initiated 6 regional conventions on the recognition of higher education qualifications, including the Asia-Pacific Regional Convention, which was first adopted in Bangkok, Thailand in 1983, commonly known as the 1983 Bangkok Convention. To date, there are 21 parties to the 1983 Bangkok Convention. Fiji did not become a party to the 1983 Bangkok Convention. In view of new developments, Mr. Speaker, sir, shaping higher education, such as the increase in the number of higher education institutions, the increasing use of information technology, and the diversification of higher education providers culminated in the revision of the 1983 Bangkok Convention. The revision process led to the adoption of a new convention in Tokyo, Japan in 2011, the Asia-Pacific Regional Convention on the Recognition of Qualifications in Higher Education, which is the convention, the subject convention. The convention ensures that higher education students and the studies, Mr. Speaker, sir, are recognized as widely as possible. Sorry, I need to say that again. The convention ensures that the higher education studies in its member countries are recognized as widely as possible, given the diversity of education systems within the region. So it's mutual recognition of various institutions and the curriculum it offers. The convention came into force on 1st of February 2018. To date, a total of 15 member states have either signed, ratified or acceded to the convention. The convention, Mr. Speaker, sir, is a total of 10 sections. Whilst the preamble states the purpose of the convention itself, Article 1 provides for the definition of terms such as higher education, etc. Article 2 outlines the application of the convention on competent recognition authorities, which is a governmental or non-governmental body official authorized by government with making decisions on the recognition of foreign qualifications. Article 3 defines the basic principles related to the assessment of qualifications. Article 4 provides for the recognition of qualifications giving access to higher education, including accreditation of foreign qualifications. It also imposes each party, Mr. Speaker, sir, to impose additional requirements on holders of higher education or higher qualification to enable access to higher education programs within their own and be equated with a significant acquisition of skill and knowledge. Article 7 allows for the recognition of qualifications held by refugees, displaced persons, and persons in a refugee-like situation, even when qualifications obtained in one of the parties can be proven through documentary evidence. Article 8 provides that each party to maintain national information centres and provide adequate information on its institutions and higher education system and qualifications for competent recognition authorities of other parties. Mr. Speaker, sir, as far as the requirements for implementation of this particular convention on domestic law, there is no specific requirement under the Convention to implement the provision of the Convention by domestic law. However, one of the recommendations we've seen in the committee is to review the Higher Education Act. While the recommendation of the committee is noted, the Higher Education Act 2008 in fact has no bearing on the domestic implementation of the Convention itself. The current provision of the Higher Education Act 2008 does not restrict or do not restrict Fiji from meeting its obligations under the Convention. Under the Convention, Fiji must have a competent recognition authority. As the central authority to make decisions on recognition, the Fiji Higher Education Commission will be responsible for this role and will be bound by the provisions of the Convention. Mr. Speaker, sir, regarding assessment, Articles 4 and 7 of the Convention mandates for state parties to make appropriate arrangements for the assessment and recognition of qualifications that are transparent, coherent, reliable, fair, timely, and non-discriminatory. This includes the assessment of partial studies. Fiji already has the Fiji National Qualifications Framework, which is used to compare provider qualifications with levels on the FQF for the accreditation of qualifications. The FQF, or the National Qualification Framework, requires a platform for different learning pathways and promotes learner mobility by clarifying how qualifications relate to each other within the national education and training system. In Fiji's case, our FQF is managed by the Fiji Qualifications Council. In 2012, Mr. Speaker, sir, the UNESCO Asia Pacific Regional Bureau for Education prepared the toolkit for the recognition of foreign higher education qualification. The main goal behind the development of this toolkit is to provide a common reference guide for the Asia Pacific region with regard to assessing higher education qualifications. Last year, the FQF was reviewed to align it with the guidelines provided under the toolkit. Article 7 of the Convention requires each state party to establish a system, a unit or a center that acts as a single point of contact, which is called the National Information Center, or NIC, to provide information on qualification and higher education systems. In 2013, the UNESCO Asia Pacific Regional Bureau for Education prepared the guidelines for NICs for the recognition of foreign qualifications in higher education. The Fiji Higher Education Commission has a national database that collates information about the higher education institutions and conventions. This will be expanded, Mr. Speaker, now under the FHEC for the purpose of the convention in line with the guideline. Mr. Speaker, sir, of course, the ratification of this convention will give Fiji a lot more prominence in the Asia Pacific region. We're seeing a movement of students in and out of Fiji, and of course, the education sector in itself has become an international trade, if you like, for want of another word, where we have a lot of students that are now, for example, we have in Fiji, a lot of Japanese students come to Fiji, in particular in the Western Division, to learn English, improve their English. We have, of course, other Fijian students going to other parts of Asia Pacific now to be able to upgrade their skill sets, whether it's in the universities, etc., in terms of the master's program, in terms of the PhD program. So this will create a lot more of a universal application of the accreditation for our universities, of course, in particular for Fiji National University, and is therefore recommended, Mr. Speaker, sir, that we ratify this convention. Thank you.
I thank the Honourable Attorney General. The floor is open for debate. Honourable Minister Kusumati, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I understand to support the motion that's before the House for the recognition of for Fiji signing up to this convention for the recognition of higher education qualifications for the Asia Pacific region. Fiji for a long time has been a hub of education in the Pacific. A lot of people from the different countries have come, initially because we had the University of the South Pacific here. So over the years, we've managed to be able to develop our ability to be an education hub. But of course, the limitations for that was that it was only recognized across the Pacific. This, obviously, signing up to this recognition of higher education qualifications across the Asia-Pacific regions means that there will be a greater portability of qualifications. Qualifications from Fiji being recognized in Asia-Pacific countries, and also people in Asia-Pacific countries can continue, it will strengthen our ability to be an education hub. As the Attorney General has pointed out, people come to Fiji to study Korean, to study English. Students from Korea, students from Japan, they come and study here. But largely, a lot of them come to study English. But now they'll have the opportunity to come and study within our institutions, and if those qualifications are recognized, it can become portable to their own countries. One of the other areas that I was thinking of as I was hearing this was one of the challenges that we have in a lot of these Asian countries is the changing of their population structures. A lot of the countries are becoming much older. And in Fiji, you know, in the Pacific, we have a much younger population. A lot of these countries are now facing labor shortages. They need to look at getting people from other countries to contribute to their GDP because there are a lot more older people in their countries, so it becomes much more difficult for those countries to look for young people to do work that is required. Now this then presents an opportunity for us in places like Fiji, where we can train up our young in qualifications that will then be recognized in those other countries, and it assists the ability to be able to go and work in those other countries because their qualifications from Fiji will be recognized in those other countries. We know that one of the challenges that we had when we looked at the unemployment survey that came out a few years ago, I can't actually remember what year it was, probably 2017 or 2018, that our unemployment rate in general was around 4.5%, but for youth was 18%. So one of the challenges that we have is also to find employment opportunities for our people offshore. And I believe the recognition of qualifications, if Fiji signs up to this convention, our Fiji qualifications will also be recognized offshore, and it gives us an opportunity to tap into those markets. One particular market that has been talked about recently is the ability for us to send people to work as caregivers. But in a lot of these countries, they have their own qualifications on what is required for a person to come from Fiji. Must have a qualification that is recognized in this country. So this opens up a lot of opportunities, not only for people from other countries that wish to get trained in Fiji, but also for people that are in Fiji that can have Fiji qualifications that are recognized in other countries, especially in the Asia-Pacific region, that allows for portability of our young. It opens up work opportunities. So with those few words, Mr. Speaker, sir, I completely support the motion for the House.
I thank the Honourable Minister Musumati. Honourable Minister for Education, you have the floor.
Honourable Speaker, sir, I also rise to support the motion before the House. I'd just like to add on my contributions to the speakers before me. And I'd also like to thank the work of the Fiji Higher Education Commission. I believe that we need international consistency in the recognition processes which will enable transparent information of quality assurance processes for higher education. It will also lead to open mechanisms for information about higher education institutions and programs across the region and countries. And of course, it will enable building of trust between different national institutions and competent recognition of authorities. There will be greater shared understanding of fair and reasonable processes and procedures for recognition and, of course, capacity building in processes. Recognition, Honourable Speaker, can also be seen as an enabler for quality enhancement of higher education system, and which will help in retaining and attracting talent to higher education systems across the region, and promoting as well as facilitating knowledge and skill transfer across borders, and of course leading to increasing the quality and research and of course innovation capacities, and improving the quality of teaching and learning of higher education institutions. And I also believe that this will also lead to improving graduate competencies as well. And raising the profile and importance of higher education recognition also is important, because there will be focus on high level focus on the importance, and recognition will serve as an indicator of the standards of higher education in the education of member states. So all in all, Mr. Speaker, sir, I stand to support the motion. Thank you.
I thank the Honourable Minister. I now give the floor to the Attorney General and Minister for Economy, Civil Service and Communications, the Honorable Ayaz Said Qayyum, to speak on his right of reply. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'd like to thank the two honourable ministers for their support for the ratification of this particular convention. As highlighted by them and as all the committees recommended, this ratification will in fact help propel Fiji a lot further into the international sphere regarding higher education and the quality and accreditation across borders, and in fact it will be good both for our institutions and also for the overall well-being of the Fijian people. Thank you very much.
Honourable members, the Parliament will now vote. The question is, for the purposes of Section 51 of the Constitution of the Republic of Fiji and pursuant to Standing Orders 130, that Parliament approves that Fiji accedes to the 2011 Asia-Pacific Convention on the Recognition of Higher Education Qualifications. Does any member oppose the motion?
No.
As no member opposes, the motion is agreed to unanimously.